Ladies and gentlemen, time for the This Is How We Do It section of our conference. We'll talk about inclusive leadership. Here to talk about it, Michalina Konkel. Hello, Michalina. Can you hear me?
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I can hear you. I can see you. So welcome on our session.
Great. Wonderful. Wonderful. Michalina, to start with, it's only proper that we should ask the underlying question. What is inclusive leadership? Is it another buzzword, another popular phrase in the corporate environment? Is it a fashion? What is it?
What is it? I would say yes and no in the same time. A lot of people react for this inclusive leadership as you said, it's another fashion. However, my question is actually, is it fashionable to wear a warm jacket in winter? It can be fashionable, but it's also needed. So these two things are in the same time. There is a lot of need in not only in the market, but in the society to build inclusive leadership. And in the same time, we can do it in different ways. And one of them, some of them can be fashionable and nice and elegant, and some of them can be just, ineffective and really bumpy.
All right. Would you say, is it fair to say that in terms of competence levels, managers and leaders in organizations have what it takes to deliver on the inclusive leadership front? Or is something missing from the equation?
A lot of competencies are already built, I would say, especially when it comes to shared services centers, which are present in Poland. Like the level of competencies is higher every year. We can see it when it comes to challenges which we are supporting. And in the same time, inclusive leadership, what it demands integration of a lot of aspects which have already been addressed, and some new ones. So, for example, part of inclusive leadership, it's about developing a lot of self-awareness and compassion and empathy in a way you communicate with other people, to be aware of your own biases, which you have, your own stereotypes, and how they influence your decision processes. And in the same time, this inclusive leadership demands knowledge about differences which are present in a team and in an organization. And in the same time, you have to, like, leaders need to know how to react, how to intervene in specific moments. And this is very concrete knowledge and skills which leaders have to build up.
So how do you get the step-by-step as if? Is it about procedure? Is it about a comprehensive training required at company level? Step by step, how do you get to inclusive leadership in a company?
So the thing is that, some companies decide for trainings, but probably many of you already heard that organizational culture eats training for lunch. So for sure it's not enough because the cultural patterns will still be too strong to implement information just from the trainings. So what is needed is the whole intervention in the system. So the best possible way is to start with engagement of leaders. So if you're HR manager, it would be great to organize a meeting or a workshop where you engage leaders in a discussion about this inclusive leadership itself. So just to check the what we call in Polish the pulse of organization, to see their attitude towards it, how they react, what's their approach to the topic. So first is to engage then the best possible way is to measure, to see how employees are seeing the situation. So one thing which you can do some kind of scannings in the organization to see how employees are doing in that field. And on the other hand, you can organize some focus groups to hear the voice of employees, to see and hear what actually is missing for them when it comes to building this feeling of belonging and contributing to a certain organization, to your organization, not any other one. And then, basing on the aspect which you gather, to design intervention which can be adequate in a given situation. So trainings will be just part of it. Another one is a lot of peer support. So specific let's say, I would call it workshops, task forces, ask me anything sessions inside the organization, which support implementation of these new skills and new knowledge, which is going to be built. So, yeah.
I understand much of that might actually be part of your consultancy work for companies, but could you imagine we're dealing with a skeptical audience, with someone who perhaps doesn't fully understand what it means, what it stands for, what inclusive leadership stands for. Then if we were to take it to the level of a very specific argument, why should I care from a leadership level of an organization to take any steps along those lines? Well, most leaders, as you would imagine, possibly it's not fair to say that they tend to be convinced they are doing the right thing and they're doing it well, because that's why they have been chosen to be leaders of organizations, and they've been chosen based on their competencies and experience. So I suppose the only way to persuade them, to convince them that they should change something about their management style, is to present it in a way that feels tangible, relatable, that feels that they genuinely believe they should do something about it. So how do you do it?
I mean, the first step is to make them aware that something doesn't work. So, so they need to hear the voice of their teams, of their team members, so that something doesn't really work, and that this decrease their motivation to work. So. When we do it, it's like, firstly you asked about this, how to convince them. So usually people are resistant to this concept of inclusive leadership because I would say that internally they are not ready to be inclusive for themselves. Like they don't, they have a strong, very often very strong ego. So what I mean is that they don't accept some parts of their personality, and it's hard for them also to include others in it. So when we have really leaders who got the feedback that they are not inclusive and they are still don't get the point, so very often the intervention which we are doing is more about more personal development aspects. So we offer workshops which are building this higher self-awareness. Such programs are called leadership development intensive programs, when they are learning more about themselves to be able to learn more about others. So this is like the first step to convince them to be more inclusive.
The first step, you said. All right. Another one. Has COVID changed anything about the way leaders see inclusive leadership?
Yeah, I would say much.
With everyone in home office.
Yeah, exactly. I'd say that up to now, these D&I aspects, at least in Poland, in Krakow, they were mainly touching these big groups of diversity. I mean, when it comes to gender, sexual orientation, your ethnicity. But nowadays, when we work from home, this inclusion is more about how can we embrace our, I would say, humanity, that we are all human beings. I mean, how can you be, how can you react in an inclusive way and respectful way when you talk with your general manager and out of the sudden the cat is jumping on his head. So these aspects of inclusion, I would say, have different shades now. It's more about human to human interaction than like a person of one characteristic with a person of another characteristic. So everything became more, I would say, universal in a way. So all aspects are more more personal, I would say.
Michalina, from what you're saying, it sounds like your role starts at a point when there is a problem, there is a challenge, there is an issue inside the corporate ecosystem, and someone makes a decision, we need to call an external consultant, we need someone to help us with that, whether it's an isolated case or whether it's a growing, accelerating challenge on a structural level. So how do you measure these things once you enter the company premises? How do you measure the scale of the problem, the scale of the challenge? Is it a more deep-rooted issue than just an isolated case of a single employee complaining about a particular D&I relevant area? And then once you decide on a set of actions, how do you measure success in terms of inclusive leadership in an organization?
Actually, I would also be a bit, maybe not provocative, maybe it's not the best word at this moment, but measuring things which we are asked to repair is relatively easy. It's more difficult to measure our progress when there is a team where everything works, but they just want to be better. It's much harder then. But what we can measure, actually, what can be KPIs in this area, and it's challenging for many organizations how to measure that. So to measure inclusive leadership, what we can do is to measure the number of team meetings being focused on team itself, for example, to discuss what's working, what's not working. You can also measure meetings which were organized, but team members themselves, not only by the leader. You can measure numbers of escalations, if it's to what extent employees or the team members can solve problems, conflicts by themselves, and to what extent they need a leader. If it's inclusive leadership, usually teams are much more independent, so they can solve themselves. When it comes to the level of the organization, we can measure the number of agendas of meetings and how often the topic of diversity or inclusion is being raised. So we can measure how the awareness of leaders, to what extent they talk with groups, with teams about that, and in the same time we can measure numbers of not numbers, but we can measure behaviors which indicate inclusive culture. Yeah, and of course we can measure behaviors which are not like discriminatory behaviors. Yeah, if the number is dropping, and for example, no one reports discrimination or microaggressions at the workplace. So these are indicators that situation is being changed.
Which brings me to my very last question, Michalina, and that is the risk areas and risk management areas, if you like. Where do you see the risks and where are the bottlenecks in the organization once you already start promoting and strengthening inclusive leadership in an organization as a consultancy, as someone who's brought in to support the organization in developing those qualities of the organization. So where are the key risks? What really cannot happen for this to be successful?
So I would say that there are two bottlenecks, or actually, or even three, depending on or where we start. Sometimes organizations start with top management, like to engage top management in such actions to build this inclusive leadership culture, and the whole process of cascading is losing information, losing engagement. Very often, middle management is the biggest bottleneck because they've got some information from top management, but they don't feel the pressure and they don't feel the pain of employees being in some difficult situations. So the most important actually group to work with are this middle management managers, to involve them, to listen to them, to give them tools, to skill them up in very simple but adequate tools to intervene in the situations. With the bottom-up approach, people are having initiatives. They are grouping up with in form of different networks to do something in the company, but top management is not engaged. They don't have any strategy for D&I. These groups don't have budgets for actions, and this also could be a bottleneck. Yeah, I mean, that it won't be effective, because all initiatives cannot be made only by volunteers, because D&I thing is serious. I mean, it's when a company wants to have effects in this area, it has to be treated as regular work to be done in the organization.
Truly sounds like a noble, worthy cause, a goal to have, especially for a consultancy, doesn't it? Michalina Konkel, thank you very much for joining us today. Stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And all of you, thank you.